Hi, everybody. My name is Nicole Greening, and I'm the children's selector here at Whitehots. I'd like to thank everyone for joining Whitehots today for the Dewey Divas and the Dudes Top Juvenile and Young Adult Picks for Underrepresented Voices presentation. I think we all want to see ourselves in a story, and we're on a path to make sure that every member of our society has the ability to do so. Our hot list for this presentation can be found on our website under Young Readers Dewey Divas. As well, there will be a follow-up email sent out after this event with links to the hot list and the handouts. An email was sent yesterday with a link for today's handout. This event will be recorded and a link will be sent later on next week. Our presenters today include Lahring Tribe from Penguin Random House, Laureen Cusack from Ampersand, Tim Gain from Manda, Margot Stokreef from Martin and Associates, Janet Murie from Orca, Allie Chenoweth from Scholastic, and Rosalyn Steele from HarperCollins. All right, Lahring, want to begin?
Okay. Thanks, Nikki. And hi, I'm Lahring Tribe with Penguin Random House. And it's my pleasure this morning to be able to share some of my favorite books for children and young adults from voices who have often been less represented. Starting with 10 Little Dumplings. In the town of Tainan, Taiwan, if one son is good luck, 10 must be fabulous. In one family, 10 wonderful boys, their parents' pride and joy, grow up and do everything together, celebrated by their family and community. But is someone being overlooked in the process? The brothers have a sister. If you pay attention, you can find her on almost every spread. This debut picture book by Larissa Fan, yes, there's a Fan's sister, is derived from a short story she created based on her father's family story. My First Day. As this debut by an Own Voices author-illustrator team begins, a young boy is preparing for his first solo trip down the Mekong River. If you're just along for the ride, you will marvel at the exotic flora and fauna, shiver at the perils he faces, and applaud his determination. But if you're paying close attention to this text, you will not be surprised by the denouement. He's on his way to school. Tough Like Mom. This somewhat sober book introduces Kim and her mother, a loving parent who is utterly no nonsense at work, but some days cannot get out of bed. No problem, Kim is tough too. She can make her own breakfast and pack her own lunch, but she won't be able to go on the school trip unless her mother gives her the $6 it costs or ticks the box that says she can't afford to pay. This understated book is simultaneously heartwarming and heartbreaking in its depiction of a small family dealing with poverty and its accompanying issues. This story portraying economic diversity shows what Kim and her mother cope with and is a gentle introduction to a reality experienced by far too many children. Born Ready. In this picture book companion to her adult memoir, Bold World, Jodi Patterson tells the story of her transgender son. Penelope knew even when very young that he didn't just feel like a boy, he was a boy. While the world at large is sometimes reluctant to accept Penel as he is part of a large and very supportive extended family, including his grandfather, who notes that in the African language he speaks, there are no genderized terms. Bracelets for Bina's Brothers is the latest entry in Charles Bridges' storytelling math series, which depicts children from diverse backgrounds engaging in everyday math activities, in this case, identifying and working with patterns. Bina is preparing for Raksha Bandhan, a Hindu holiday which celebrates the bond between brothers and sisters. Instead of buying gifts for her brothers, she decides to make bracelets which reference their favorite activities, enhanced by patterns which reflect their favorite colors. Notes at the end offer math tips and a brief introduction to the holiday. On the Trap Line. In this evocatively meditative companion to the Gigi winning When We Were Alone, an urban indigenous boy goes with his grandfather to the village where Moshem grew up. As they visit places of significance, the boy listens to his grandfather's memories of spending summers on the trap line, sleeping in a tent with his family, even hearing an oblique reference to attending residential schools. And he experiences the connection to the land and the community for himself. Each memory is expanded by the inclusion of a word from the swampy Cree language. Out into the big wide lake introduces Kate. When she is 10, her grandmother asks Kate's mother if her daughter can spend the summer at her grandparents' Muskoka cottage. Her mother hesitates. Kate has Down syndrome, but Grandma says, why not? And why not becomes the refrain for the summer. Her grandparents have a small grocery store, and soon Kate is accompanying her grandpa as he makes deliveries around the lake. Over the summer, she learns to pilot the boat herself, taking over when her grandfather becomes ill and continuing as he recovers. Back matter provides more information about the author's sister, the inspiration for the character of Kate. Becoming Vanessa. Vanessa is really excited about the first day of kindergarten. She wants to make an impression on her classmates and hopes to make friends, but her flamboyant costume attracts the wrong kind of attention. Worse, she struggles to write her name. In short, the day is a colossal disappointment and Vanessa comes home deflated. Tomorrow, she says, she's just going to wear gray sweatpants, and she even wants a new, simpler name. Then her mother intervenes and helps Vanessa regain her confidence and sense of being special. Too Small Tola is the first in a planned 4-book chapter book series, each containing 3 stories about Tola, who lives with her older brother and sister and their grandmother in Lagos, Nigeria. In the first story, Too Small Tola is not too small to catch a shopkeeper trying to shortchange her grandmother, and inspired by her grandmother's example, manages to carry their heavy purchases home from the market. In the second story, she resourcefully defeats bullies. In the third, she helps a man with a broken leg continue to work as a tailor prior to Easter and Ramadan, keeping him and his family financially solvent. Peter Lee's notes from the field. Given the good things in 11-year-old Peter's life, strict but loving parents, loving and less strict grandparents, a genius little sister who manages not to be completely annoying, having asthma is no big deal. Even better, the family has planned a trip to Drumheller so Peter can indulge his passion for paleontology. Then it all falls apart. He finds digging for dinosaur bones hot and dirty work, causing him to question his calling even before the dust triggers an asthma attack. Worse, his grandmother starts having trouble remembering, and his parents talk about her going into a facility. So Peter and Sister LB use their creativity and resourcefulness to try to find a way to keep their beloved grandmother at home. This warm, realistic portrait of a Korean-Canadian family will resonate with any reader with strong intergenerational ties. Wonder Women of Science offers a lively introduction to 12 young and relatable women currently working in various STEM fields. These diverse women come from a variety of backgrounds. Some had parents who were very STEM-oriented, but just as many families were quite ordinary, including several with supportive single parents. Very few of the researchers were math whizzes or science geeks when younger. Some had to apply themselves to succeed academically, and most preferred sports to school. This informative and inspiring book provides not only an introduction to the women, but also to the fields in which they work, including veterinary medicine, paleoclimatology, car and spacesuit design, computer games, and inevitably rocket science. Neurodiverse astronomer Sarah Seeger, originally from Toronto and known for her work on extrasolar planets and their atmospheres, is one of the scientists included. Black Boy Joy. This new middle grade anthology by 17 male and non-binary writers celebrates the joy and complexities of Black boyhood. These entertaining and inspiring stories about picking out a new first day of school outfit, finding your voice through writing poetry in tough times, even something as simple as riding your skateboard. Focus on kindness and inclusivity. Kadir Nelson will do the jacket art, and Jason Reynolds and Jerry Kraft are among the contributors, as well as 2 new voices selected through an open Call for Joy submission contest. Then, young adult titles, starting with the Gilded Ones. Deka, An outsider in her patriarchal society because her dark-skinned mother is extra anxious about the upcoming ceremony where girls are bled to determine their future. Red means purity, a husband, and a place in the community. Gold means you're a demon who must be destroyed. Deka bleeds gold, so even though the authorities repeatedly try to kill her, she repeatedly returns to life. When a mysterious woman appears and offers her the opportunity to join an army of girls like herself, Deka jumps at the chance. She becomes one of the close-knit and mutually supportive Alakai, training to fight the death shrieks which threaten their world. This book begins with an Atwoodian look at a male-dominated culture, then becomes more of a military adventure tale, containing a blend of violence, slow-burn romance, and supportive female friendships. The author was inspired by her experiences growing up during Sierra Leone's civil war and by the support she has received from female family members and friends. And I was lucky enough to hear her speak at a recent sales conference. If you ever get the chance to listen to her speak, absolutely take it. And Home is Not a Country. The catalog describes Home is Not a Country as a novel in verse about a Muslim American girl who isn't traditional enough to suit her mother, but is too different to be accepted by her suburban classmates. It is that, but it's so much more. Midway through the book, Nima slips through a portal and finds herself coming to understand her family's history and that of her mother's best friend, also the events which brought them to America, and most importantly, her own story. The language positively shimmers, although not in a way that makes it unreadable, and alternates between witty commentary on ultra-relatable everyday events and gut-punch moments, like being turned away from an airport check-in by a racist airline employee. It is all too rare to be transported from duty read to wow, just wow, in a few pages, but this book did it. I have to agree with Elizabeth Acevedo that it's nothing short of magic. American Betia. Rani is a part of a loud and loving immigrant Indian family with high expectations for her. Complete focus on her education, no dating, which she adheres to until she meets brooding, intense Oliver at an exhibition of her photos. Forbidden romance ensues, alternately exhilarating and angsty, especially when Oliver can't understand why she won't introduce him to her family. Rani struggles to figure out how to balance her culture, her family's expectations, and her personal identity and wishes, how to establish healthy boundaries for herself, and how to discern when love is blurred by obsession driven by appropriation and fetishization. Wounded by Oliver's betrayal, Rani is sustained by her true friends and her family, including her grandmother, who offers a compelling metaphor for her experience. Spices must be burned before they can produce the best, most complex flavors. Off the record. Teen journalist Josie Wright wins a contest to do a profile on rising star Marius Cannett, and soon she is traveling in circles she previously only read about, hanging with celebrities, spending time on movie sets, and attending glittering parties. Even more astonishing, Marius seems to be taking an interest in her, although plus-size Josie is skeptical about his long-term intentions. Then a young woman approaches her with a Me Too story, and she is plunged into turmoil. Surely she is not the right person to write such a story. College sophomore Cameron Garrett's second novel is not strictly autobiographical, but it does draw on her experiences as a teenage reporter for Time magazine, as well as coping with the feeling of being in over your head, being a woman in a man's world, being Black in a white-dominated world, and being plus-sized in any world. Summer in the City of Roses. Inspired by a grim fairy tale and containing many fantasy elements, this is the story of a brother and sister finding their own true identities in the face of abuse and neglect. With their mother away doing an artistic residency, their father sends Iphigenia's sensitive younger brother Orr, a musician, to wilderness boot camp to toughen him up, despite her vehement protests. She goes in pursuit, and the story unfolds against the backdrop of the punk rock scene in the Pacific Northwest in the 1990s. Many of the characters are dealing with racial issues, intergenerational trauma, homelessness, and simply just not fitting in. Several of them are LGBTQ+. In 2020, we understand their issues better, but at the time the novel is set, no one had the words, and generally they use sex work vocabulary to describe them. Despite its grit, this powerful story is notable for its beautiful lyrical language and emotional depth. Radha and Jay's recipe for romance. Radha competes in traditional Indian dance at a very high level, until she hears another competitor talking about how Radha's mother sleeps with the judges to make sure she wins. More devastated by her mother's lack of confidence in her than her moral failing, Radha quits dancing and moves across the country where she will attend a performing arts school, determined to explore cooking, not dance. There she meets Jay. His family can't afford for him to study medicine, so why not do a spectacular job of choreographing the school's musical as his swan song? Of course, it would be easier if he could talk Radha out of her self-induced retirement. Romance ensues, at least partly from their shared experience of struggling to meet their immigrant parents' expectations and dreams for them. Dance, food, and Bollywood. What's not to like? Bad Witch Burning. Cottrell's life is tough. Money is tight, and her unemployed mother's latest deadbeat boyfriend thinks he can order Cottrell around as if she was her father. As if he was her father. Luckily, Cottrell can speak to the dead, and this brings in enough money to keep the wolf from the door, until she starts getting warnings from beyond that she should stop her ghostly communications. She doesn't scare easily. Besides, she needs the money. So she keeps on. When the deadbeat boyfriend shoots her beloved dog to prove a point during an argument, she reanimates him. But what comes back is no friendly rover, but something far more demonic. Ditto for the humans she brings back from the dead, deliberately or accidentally. This debut offers an unusual hybrid of gritty social commentary and adrenaline-laced horror as Cottrell struggles to control her black girl magic and the forces it unleashes. My final book, Let's Talk About It, is graphic in format and content, as it basically contains everything a teen doesn't want to talk about parents about but needs to know. Body image, body positivity, consent, gender and identity, sex, anatomy, and jealousy. Two notable things about this book. Its frankness. There is quite a bit of nudity. If they talk about sex, then sex is depicted. And its inclusivity and broad representation. All gender identities and sexual orientations are depicted, as are a wide range of body types, appearances, and abilities. The chapter on jealousy is told partially in sign language. It is clear from this resource that anyone, not just able-bodied, model-thin, straight white people, can participate in loving relationships and sexual behavior. That's my list. I hope you find something of interest or of use to you. And now over to Laureen.
Hi, everyone. This is Laureen Cusack speaking to you from Ampersand, and here is my list. First up is the case of the Burgle Bundle, a mighty muskrat's mystery. This is an Indigenous story. It's the third book in the mystery series. It's now become a very successful middle grade novel, and it has a really wide appeal in its readership. The stories are humorous and engaging, and they're very easy to read with lots of adventure and fast-paced plotting. In this story, the National Assembly of the Cree peoples are gathered together at the Windy Lake First Nation. It's a 4-day-long ceremony, but something is amiss. The ceremonial memory bundle that is presented to the host nation has gone missing. And then the 4 mystery-solving cousins are quickly on the case. This is a paperback original. The author is Michael Hutchinson, and he's a member of the Mississippiwistic Cree Nation north of Winnipeg. He's a journalist and quite politically active, and he recently relocated to Winnipeg after spending time in Ottawa and currently works for CTV's morning show. I understand this book has been picked for a Lone Star pick for March, April. The Power of Style. This is another Indigenous author. It's for the young adult market, but can also be for a more advanced middle grade reader. This is a magazine style book with stunning photographs. It's a fresh and different approach to fashion and pop culture. Defying Stereotypes and Gender. It's by Ojibwe fashion writer Christian Allaire. He's the fashion and style writer for Vogue magazine and a Canadian from the Nipissing First Nation in Ontario. Allaire discusses and champions Indigenous fashion and culture, but not exclusively. It also features styles designed for Muslim women, gay men, and the LGBT community in general. He also highlights makeup for men and women of color, and he also does hairstyle, and he sort of profiles trendsetters. There's also additional sidebars on history, politics, and social justice. I Dream of Popo. This is a hardcover picture book and based on the author's childhood experience. It's the emotionally tender story of a young girl whose family emigrates from Taiwan to America, leaving behind Popo, her grandmother. They miss each other daily, but keep in touch virtually. And if time allows, the family gets together through an actual visit back home. There's an author's and illustrator's note at the back of the book explaining their personal journeys and a glossary of words. Outside Inside. This story begins with this sentence. Something strange happened on an unremarkable day just before the season changed. Everybody who was outside went inside all over the world. So this poignant picture book celebrates the first responders and the essential workers and those who demonstrated acts of kindness during a challenging year of the global pandemic. My next book is called Home is in Between. This story explores immigration, blended cultures, and identity. Shanti trudges between two worlds. She is Indian, but she's also American. She remembers her Indian village and friends with great fondness, but now she lives in a new town, a big city with new friends. Shanti learns how to adapt to her new home, her new school and friends, and the different environment that she lives in, one that includes 4 seasons. There's an author's note at the back of the book and a glossary of words, and this book was also a Lone Star pick. My next book is called ABC of Gender Identity. This is a juvenile nonfiction picture book in paperback format. And basically, it's gender identity. It's an important part of who we are and how we express ourselves in the world. This is an A to Z of gender identities for kids ages 5+. It has simple explanations and a diverse cast of illustrated characters. So it's a perfect book for exploring diversity and acceptance and equality. Some Other Now by Sarah Everett. Well, let me first say that Sarah is from Edmonton, so we have a Canadian author on our list, another one. And we're very excited to have her on our list because she's just a debut author and she's starting to get some nice publicity that's happening right now. This YA novel is a swoon-worthy romance. The main character is biracial and a down-to-earth 17-year-old girl named Jessie. And the story is told in alternating then and now chapters, the summer before and the summer after. Everything changed between her best friend, Rowan, and his brother, Luke. And Luke was Jessie's first crush and the boy she spent a whole summer daydreaming about. This is coming out, it already published. It just came out in February. The Forest of Stolen Girls is another YA title. June Her is a Canadian author and she lives here in Toronto, and June works for the Toronto Public Library. It's June's 3rd book. It's historical fiction and a mystery set in ancient Korea in the year 1426. The main character is a young girl named Hwani. She and her younger sister went missing, but were later found unconscious. It was very unexplainable at the time. Years later, however, their father, Detective Min, learns another group of girls have recently disappeared from the same forest that nearly stole his daughters. And upon investigating, Detective Min also vanishes. Determined to find her father, Hwani returns home to her small village and is reconnected with her estranged sister. All of this dating back to when they had disappeared. She thinks there's a connection to her father's disappearance and what happened to her and her sister years ago. Another YA book is called Can't Stop, Won't Stop. This is a YA nonfiction book on the history of hip-hop music in the United States, and it's been adapted from the author's adult trade edition. So the hip-hop music genre took the music world and the industry by surprise and by storm. It defined a whole generation of fans and gave voice to a group of men and women that wouldn't normally have been given a break in the industry. It's based on original interviews with DJs and rappers, activists, and even gang members, as well as the founders and mavericks of the genre. Chang and Cook meticulously chronicle the music events of hip-hop from the beginning to the present day. And it also includes black and white photos throughout. Marvin's Monster Diary, number 3. There's actually 4 books. But this one is available now, so I thought I would talk about this book, which is coming out in April, and the 4th one, I think, is coming out for later on in the summer. But Marvin's Monsters, Trouble with Friends is the 3rd book in the series. These stories are written to help children cope with ADHD symptoms and with special emphasis on building their social skills. So in this new story, Marvin the Monster is back at summer camp with his monster friends. And there's a new monster at the camp, and his name is Joey Inverness. He's a lake monster, like the Loch Ness, and he's a real pain. No one wants to be his friend. Only Marvin extends an invitation to join the group. The story is written in diary format, very much like Diary of a Wimpy Kid. It has black and white illustrations, short chapters, quite manageable for a reluctant reader. It's also a paperback original, and there is a note for parents at the back of the book explaining why the author has written something specifically for kids with ADHD. I'm Not a Girl. This is a transgender story. It's based on a true transgender identity journey, and it's based on writer Maddox Lyons' experience. So author Maddox Lyons and the illustrator Dana Simpsons are both transgender. And while there are other picture books about gender identity, most of them feature trans girls. This is a trans boy story. And nobody seems to understand that Hannah, the girl in the story, is not really a girl. She's a boy. So Hannah has to show the world and her family and friends who he really is. And readers will notice the subtle changes after each turn of the page. You'll slowly see Hannah change into the boy he wants to be. There is an author's note at the back of the book, and they're sharing additional information on what it means to be transgender, plus a long list of recommended resources in various media formats. And my last book is called The Teen Girl's Anxiety Survival Guide. Now, I included this because sometimes we hear a lot about young people with anxiety and mental health issues, but sometimes we don't see a lot of books. But I've got a few on our list, and this is the one that's I think is going to provide a lot of help. So the Teen Girl's Anxiety Survival Guide. Basically, did you know that anxiety disorders have skyrocketed in the teen girls readership? Author Lucy Hemon, a clinical psychologist, claims teen girls face high expectations and the pressure to be perfect. And this YA book offers 10 strategies based on cognitive behavior therapy to help young girls cope with anxious thoughts and feelings in healthier ways. It has a friendly tone, and readers will learn how anxiety works, why you feel it, how to overcome negative thinking, and essential mindful skills to calm your mind and body. So that's my list, friends. And if there's something on the list that you would like to read, please send me an email. I'll put my email address in the chat. And now I'm going to pass it over to Tim.
Thanks, Laureen. Good morning, everyone. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Tim Gain from Canadian Manda Group. And the first few titles I'm going to present are young adult recommendations, the first of which is Between Perfect and Real. This is an Own Voices trans debut coming-of-age novel about a boy finding his voice and himself. The main character is Dean Foster, who knows he's a trans boy, But his big problem is that everyone, his family, the entire school, his girlfriend Zoe, think that Dean is a lesbian. And so does the school's theater director, who chooses to cast Dean as a non-traditional choice for Romeo in the upcoming school play. Dean was planning on waiting until college to come out, but as he rehearses playing a male character each day, Dean realizes that he wants to be seen as he feels he really is by everyone, and not just when he's on stage. The book is a dramatic read, but it's full of heart and humor and hope and will resonate with all readers. It's a great recommendation for cis youth looking to gain more understanding of the additional and unique struggles that trans and non-binary individuals face. And it's obviously a much needed publication for trans and non-binary and gender identity questioning youth themselves. The next book on my list is Written in Starlight. This is a standalone companion to the author's debut Woven in Moonlight that received 2-star reviews. It's set in a beautiful but dangerous world based on the author's father's childhood home in the Amazon jungle in Bolivia. And it takes the secondary character of Catalina from the previous book, who was quite unlikable, and it fleshes out her story. She is a countess without a home, a throne, or the loyalty of her people, and she's running for her life. And she will be severely tested as she journeys through the jungle in hopes of finding a city of gold that is home to the fierce Alari indigenous peoples and striking a deal with them to provide her with an army to try to retake what's hers. Then following that is Somewhere Between Bitter and Sweet. So straight romance is not a genre I normally read, but there was a lot of early in-house love and strong pre-publication media buzz for this that convinced me to give it a try. It's an Own Voices Chicanx contemporary story about a girl named Penelope, who is an aspiring pastry chef and dreams of opening a bakery beside her father's Mexican restaurant. But Penelope's parents have a very different dream for her. And things get even more complicated when her father hires the exceptionally cute Xander, and then even more so when Xander's immigration status and the future of the restaurant are both threatened. The book's a moving and well-written novel that touches on the importance of family and food, the difficulties of first love, and finding your identity and place in the world. Then the next book on my list is Indivisible. This is a timely and moving debut novel from a Mexican-Canadian author, Daniel Ailman, who lives in Toronto. The main character in the book is Mateo. He lives in New York City and dreams of becoming a Broadway star, but he and his family are undocumented immigrants. And so one day, Mateo's parents are suddenly detained by ICE agents, and then Mateo must try to figure out how to take care of his 7-year-old sister, run his father's bodega, and maintain a facade of normalcy at school and with his friends, while at the same time trying to find a way to bring his parents back to him and his sister. And Mateo and his best friend happen to be gay. This isn't central to the plot, it's simply just a matter of fact, which I enjoyed. Because though there's still a need for more queer representation, it suggests that not every book with a queer protagonist needs to be about them coming to terms with their sexuality and their process of coming out. The next on my list is Stamped for Kids. So this is a chapter book adaptation for readers age 6 to 10 of the 5-star reviewed and best-selling young adult book, Stamped Racism, Anti-Racism, and You, that was published in spring 2020 and took off obviously after the unfortunate events of last year in the United States. So Jason Reynolds refers to these books as remixes rather than adaptations of the National Book Award-winning adult title, Stamped from the Beginning. So in this book, kids will discover where racist ideas come from, the impact that they still have today, and meet people who have fought racism with anti-racism. And along the way, they'll learn how to identify and stamp out racist thoughts in their own lives. So like the young adult version, this chapter book includes illustrations and sidebars to break up the text to make it quite accessible to young readers. And it will also include a timeline and glossary. And just a few weeks ago, it was announced that Netflix has optioned this series of books and will be creating documentaries, one for adults and one for children based on the content. Then next on my list is The Chance to Fly. So this is a debut novel and is partially based on the life of the co-author Allie Stroker, who is an activist for disabled persons and was the first actor in a wheelchair to be cast in a Broadway musical and also the first to win a Tony Award. And this book is already being adapted by Disney for a TV original movie. The main character in the book is a girl named Nat, and she has just moved cross country from San Francisco to New Jersey because of her mother's new job. She's not happy about leaving her friends, and as someone who uses a wheelchair, she worries about how accessible her new home and community will be. She also doesn't look forward to having to explain to everyone all over again what happened to her. But Nat's always been a huge theater lover, though her caring parents have kept her in activities that they feel are more suited for wheelchair users, such as racing, to avoid any potential heartbreak. But then while she is meeting a potential new racing team, Nat spies a flyer for an upcoming youth production of Wicked, and she knows she just has to audition, no matter what her parents want for her. And to her utter delight, Nat is cast in the chorus, makes some amazing and supportive new friends, and will finally have the chance to perform on stage. Then next on my list is Pity Party. I fell in love with this book based on the cover at Sales Conference, which is sort of sad, but for some reason I think really endearing. The book is a delightfully unique book that is written as a series of short stories and vignettes, all about different students at a middle school, each of whom is struggling with their own mental health issue. So it includes anxiety, depression, OCD, self-doubt, and more. And rather than meant to inspire, the book aims to encourage empathy for others and give readers the sense that they are not alone. The next on my list is Thanks a Lot Universe. This is a heartfelt and moving debut novel from a Halifax author and is told from the dual perspectives of two main characters, Brian and Ezra. After Brian's dad takes off to avoid being arrested and his mom overdoses on medication and is hospitalized, Brian and his younger brother Richie are put into the foster system. And this causes Brian's anxiety to escalate into full-blown panic attacks. And the other main character is Ezra, who is a basketball teammate of Brian's and is a boy whose friendships are starting to change and who is changing himself as he gets to know Brian and realizes that he has feelings for Brian. And so as the boys start to trust each other with their personal stories and their vulnerabilities, their friendship becomes something stable and dependable in their dramatically changing worlds. I chose to include this title because it has Caribbean, Canadian, and queer representation, but I also really love this book because it has a wide range of male representation, both in the primary and secondary characters, so it's not a story where the characters inhabit stereotypical male roles. Then moving into a few picture book titles, starting with Grandpa Across the Ocean. This is a sweet, funny story about a grandpa and grandson who managed to connect despite speaking different languages. And it's based on the Korean-American creator's visits back to where she grew up to visit her own family. So shortly after arriving with his parents at his grandparents' house in South Korea for a summer vacation, the shy little boy narrator becomes frustrated with his inability to communicate with his grandfather, having to eat strange foods. He becomes bored with what his grandfather watches on TV and by his grandfather's frequent naps, which results in a tantrum. But then as they spend more time together, shopping for food, especially sweets, and spending long days having fun at the beach, the pair learn to communicate better and bond, resulting at the end of the summer upon leaving with a most respectful bow and a giant hug. Then next is Bindu's Bindies. This is the bright and colorful companion to the many colors of Harpreet Singh from spring 2020, and is a similar story, but rather is about a little girl and her grandmother rather than a boy and his grandfather. So Bindi is a little girl who loves her bindies and the many colors and shapes that they come in. She also loves them because they are a connection to her nanny who lives in India. And when Nanny comes to visit, she brings new bindies for Bindu, just in time for Bindu to wear something new to the school talent show. But then when Bindi gets stage fright and is worried about looking different from the other children, it's Nanny who shows Bindu how to embrace her sparkle. Then my next title is Hair Twins. This is a charming picture book about the relationship between a Sikh father and daughter, and is based on the author's family members, and it is wonderfully illustrated by Holly Hatam, who lives in Burlington, Ontario. Every morning, Papa combs through his unnamed daughter's waves like he does his own, parting the hair down the middle and using coconut oil to get all the tangles out. Some days, Papa braids her hair into 2 twists down the side of her face. Other days, he weaves it into one long braid hanging way down her back. But her favorite style is when he combs her hair in a tight bun on the top of her head, just like the jura he wears every day under his turban. And on those days, they call it their hair twin look. And then the final title on my list this morning is Ambitious Girl. This is an empowering new picture book written by Mina Harris, who is Kamala Harris's niece. And it is about a little girl who sees a powerful woman on television being described as too assertive and too ambitious, which then leads the little girl on a journey of her own to learn about the challenges faced by women in the past and still in the present, and then how it is possible for women to reclaim words that are used to try to hold them back. Thanks very much for listening, and now Margot is up next.
Thanks, Tim. I shall just continue with picture books. So my first picture book is Hello, Mandarin Duck. So twins Hue and Hoa are excited for the May Day parade. And while they're waiting at the park for the parade to begin, they spot a little duck who seems to be new to the neighborhood and looks confused by the crowd and the commotion. The twins would like to help the duck get to the pond. Many friends from the neighborhood stop to say hello and offer suggestions on how to get the duck to the pond. So it's a story about teamwork, collective brainstorming, and the duck's own inspiration actually finally helps it to find its new home. It's a great celebration of the community. It's a multicultural neighborhood that welcomes a newcomer from near and from far, and it encourages communal problem solving. I think there's a subtle message in here too, particularly for the American audience on the deportation fears that some children and families would feel. So you know Bao Phi from some of his previous books. A Different Pond won many awards. It was a Caldecott honor. And his subsequent release was My Footprints, which also received many accolades and rave reviews. This is a beautiful own stories picture book and some great back matter that you can see that Bao Phi put at the back of the book. The next title is Patrick's Polka Dot Tights. So it's been 6 years since Maurice Mickelworth came out from Groundwood Books, and there's been some great books on the subject of gender neutrality for kids. This is a really fun one. It's the story of Patrick and his tights, which are smooth and stretchy and purple and polka dotty, and they're absolutely perfect for all kinds of pretend play. But Patrick's tights aren't his. They belong to his sister Penelope, who does not actually deserve them. So the author, Kristen McCurry, proves that a pair of tights and a little imagination can provide endless fun in this charming picture book about a boy's creativity. It's sweet and it's humorous, and the story has a strong theme of imaginative play. I also think that kids will really enjoy the realistic sibling relationship that is portrayed between Patrick and Penelope. From Medicine Wheel in Victoria, I have Meet Your Family, a rhythmic poem that shares a greater concept of viewing the whole world as our natural family. So Mother Earth, we come from her, we go to her, and without her, we wouldn't be here. She gives all of us life, and because of her, we are all one family. Meet Your Family shows readers how to view these important figures and shares a greater concept of seeing the world as our natural family. So we know David Bouchard for some of his previous books, as well as ones that have come through Medicine Wheel. He's won the Order of Canada. He lives in Victoria, and the artist is Christy Cameron, who also has done work for him with the 7 Sacred Teachings. The book is also dual language and has additional material for learning the language with a glossary of Ojibwe words and phonetic guide on how to say them. Next is a really fun book from Ziggy Marley. He's had some great kids' books in the past. This is a beautiful book celebrating all the different sounds that children can make music from the sounds of the ocean to the waves, to the laughter and banging pots and pans in the kitchen. Marley reminds children that everywhere that you don't need an instrument to create a beautiful song, you can come up with it anywhere in your house and the outdoors. This book is done with the heartfelt illustrations by the same artist who did Marley's picture book, I Love You Too, a very uplifting ode to the power and the beauty of song. My next title is We Move Together. This is done by 3 different contributors from Toronto and Ottawa. And this brings this bold and colorful exploration of all the ways that people navigate through the spaces around them. It's a celebration of the relationships we build along the way. It follows a mixed ability group of kids as they creatively negotiate everyday barriers and find joy and connection in disability culture and community. It's a perfect tool for families, schools, and libraries to facilitate conversations about disability, accessibility, social justice, and community building. It includes a really wonderful kid-friendly glossary and perfect for ages 6 to 9. The next title, We Want Our Books. This is introducing us to a new debut author and illustrator, Jake Alexander. It's a moving and joyful picture book about the power of protest and the importance of books. So the author calls this a children's book examining systemic racism, but perfectly age appropriate. The story shows how children have the power to change the world, and it starts when Rosa goes to the library to get a book, but she finds that the library's closed. What could be the end of the story is just the beginning. She goes home, recruits her sister Maria, and they try everything they can think of to bring their community together and fight to get back their precious library. It's a great own voices story that tackles big subjects in a child-friendly way, with beautiful artwork making this a perfect discussion starter for curious children. Next is I Am the Subway, and this is my absolute favorite picture book on this list today. It absolutely transformed me out of my lockdown living room as I read through it. It's a journey through the Seoul subway, and it portrays the many unique lives we travel alongside whenever we take the train. It's a beautiful translation by an award-winning translator, and it's accompanied by the constant rumbling of the subway, ba-dum, 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 as it takes us through the city. The subway has different stories to tell, and we hear of a story at each subway stop. Between sunrise and sunset, it welcomes and farewells people. We learn about their joys, their hopes, their fears, their memories. It was a big seller in Korea, and And it felt really nostalgic looking at this picture book. I feel like it's been well over a year since I've been on the subway doing my people watching. It's perfect for teachers and librarians looking for books that share global experiences, and a real own voice perspective, portrays beautiful city life, and has a very cinematic look to it. Award-winning translator and from one of my favorite publishers, Enchanted Lion. I am the subway. The next is Jaden's Impossible Garden. So Jaden and a new friend bring nature to the city in this timeless story about creating a community garden. So among all the buildings and the people and the traffic in his neighborhood, Jaden sees nature everywhere. He sees the squirrels scrounging, the cardinals calling, and dandelions growing. But his mama doesn't believe there's nature in the city. So Jaden's on a mission to help mama see what he sees. With the help of his friend, Mr. Curtis, Jaden plants the seeds of a community garden and brings together his neighbors and mama to show them the magic of the nature right in the middle of the city. It highlights the beauty of an intergenerational relationship and the power and imagination of perseverance in bringing the vision of a community garden to life. Lovely starred book review says, this is an abundance of steam, connections, and wonderful character representation. Moving into middle grade, Rumeza. This is a perfect read for 8 to 10-year-olds who love stories for heroines that do not need saving. This is an own voices fairy tale retelling with off-the-chart Goodreads starred reviews. This isn't a story that tries to diversify a fairy tale. This retelling takes full ownership of the story and reflects back a kick-ass, independent, clever, resourceful, caring Muslim girl. It's a simple read, yet it is interlaced with pertinent themes. Important issues are subtly highlighted, like it's not okay for people to mispronounce your name. The book has beautiful interior illustrations throughout. Also in middle grade is The Greatest Superpower. So it's the summer before he goes to high school, and 13-year-old Jorge wants nothing more than just to spend his days hanging out with his friends, reading comic books. But then everything changes. His parents announce they're divorcing for a reason Jorge and his twin brother never saw coming. Their larger-than-life dad comes out as transgender. Jorge struggles to understand his father, but his brother refuses to have anything to do with him. Jorge tries to find a way to stay true to the father he loves. Fans of Alex Sanchez will be happy to see this new book, the award-winning author of Rainbow Boys and the Lambda award-winning novel, So Hard to Say. This new middle grade novel addresses the complexities of gender identity with honesty and good humor and great heart. The Humiliations of Welton Blake. So I have chosen one of my YAs from Barrington Stoke, which is the UK-based publisher committed to producing the best books in dyslexic-friendly font and paper. And they have this imprint for YA that's interest age is 13 plus, a reading level about 6 to 9. And they include a large range of shorter novels that cover a mix of genre and focus on teen-appropriate topics. They're a fantastic option for struggling and reluctant readers who are bored of being patronized. They always find high-profile authors, and this time Alex Weedle is, you may know him from Steve McQueen's project Small Axe, but especially for his multi-starred YA books published by Cusack. So I actually invite you to check out Barrington Stoke's website. They have a full range of dyslexic-friendly, accessible books from picture books, early readers, also unabridged classics. And this season, they're beginning to publish some great nonfiction. So accessibility is really at the heart of everything this publisher does. My last title is YA. They better call me Sugar. So as a basketball fan, I'm always hopeful that Toronto will bring the WNBA, our own team. And I think a lot of Canadian girls would join in the bid for the commitment to Canadian women's basketball. And they'll love this story of Sugar Rogers, who currently plays in the WNBA in Las Vegas. This is an unflinchingly honest story about her upbringing. It's age 14 plus, as on her successful career as a professional basketball player, but fraught with sadness and with death, including her mother's death when she was 14. And she essentially became homeless. Throughout it all, Sugar clings to basketball as a way to keep herself focused and sane. And now Sugar shares her story as a message of hope and inspiration for young girls and boys everywhere, but especially those growing up in economically challenging conditions. Never sugarcoating her life experiences, she delivers a powerful message of discipline, perseverance, and always believing in oneself. Thank you, and I will now pass this over to Victoria, BC, to my dear friend, Janet Murie.
Thank you, Margot. Hi to everybody from Vancouver Island. And just before I start, I would like to say I can send out digital review copies of everything I'm talking about today. So just shoot me an email if you want. My email address is on the top of the handout. And all these books are that I'm going to talk about are also available in an ebook format. So I'm starting off with a really beautiful board book. I know most of you get your board books on an ARP, but this one I think is really special. A photographic board book featuring babies from all over the world in different family configurations and the sounds their hearts make as they beat. We might say thump thump, but the sound is different in Japanese, Italian, Spanish, Swedish, Korean, Urdu, French, and English. I think this book really shares the message that our hearts beat with the same rhythm, no matter what language we speak or where we live. And the simple rhyming stanzas make it a perfect read aloud for baby programs. Next up for me is Leopold's Leotard. And as Margot just said, we all have a favorite on our list, and this is really mine. Leopold loves to dance, and he dances everywhere he goes. When his dance teacher announces the year-end recital, he wants to be perhaps an ostrich, or even better, maybe some kind of venomous wasp. But they're going to be bees, and he is just absolutely not happy. So he gets out there on recital day, and his headband is uncomfortable, so he takes it off, and his shoes hurt, so he takes them off. And next thing you know, he's completely stark naked, leaping joyfully around the stage. I really love this image on the screen now of these little ones standing behind him with their eyes like giant saucers. So I thought, how do I justify including this in underrepresented voices? We don't hear very much from child nudists, but in actual fact, most reviewers address Leopold as gender neutral. And this is a story about a young boy who loves to dance with a focus on his experience rather than his gender. Leopold has amazing joie de vivre, I think. My next picture book is Pride Puppy. It's a young child and their family celebrate Pride Day when their puppy disappears in the crowd. It's an A to Z, with a seek and find element that follows along, shows all the people and sights they find while looking for the little puppy, and of course has a happy ending. It's a rhyming alphabet book with these rich, as you can see, and beautiful illustrations. The family is not gendered at all, and while identity is not the focus of the story, the community is certainly celebrated. It's an own voices story, and it's a good time to remind everyone that Robin Stevenson's book Pride won a Stonewall Honor, and her board book Pride Colors was shortlisted for the Lambda and was on ALA's Rainbow list. My next picture book is Riley Can't Stop Crying, about a little guy who lives with his sister and his dad. And once Riley turns 4, he just cries all the time, and there's no stopping it. So his sister is trying to figure out what's going on and asks him a whole bunch of questions. Does his head hurt? Does his tummy hurt? Is it something else? And then she remembers a time when someone at school made her feel ashamed of her body, and she asked just the right question and learned sometimes Riley would rather wear a skirt than pants and would rather play with a doll than a truck. Last year, this book won the TD Book Award in the original French edition and is a very gentle introduction to the idea of gender identity. I think the illustrations are so quirky and charming and really recognizable as a kind of Quebec style. And the length of the story, it's 80 pages, but minimal text, and it makes it a good choice for readers who are just moving from picture books into first chapter books. And Riley has had 2-star reviews. Then we're into some nonfiction with Finding Home. Human migration has become the biggest humanitarian crisis of our time, currently affecting 300 million people. And every day, 44,000 people around the world are forced to leave their homes due to war, violence, famine, or persecution. And according to the UN, the average length of time spent in a refugee camp is a shocking 17 years. Finding Home provides a brief history of human migration, as well as personal first-hand accounts of immigrants and refugees from various parts of the world. These candid accounts describe the challenges that face many immigrants trying to adapt to a new culture while still trying to preserve the traditions that are most meaningful to them, and are truly stories of courage and resilience. Finding Home is an own voices story. The author grew up the daughter of Chinese immigrants living in Vancouver, and it features a glossary, an index, and additional resources, and has weirdly gone on to become our most controversial social media, one of our most controversial social media posts ever, along with We Wear Masks, which both seem very odd choices to get wound up about. Next up is Louis Riel Day, which would fall into the advanced picture book category. When a young boy is assigned a project about the fur trade by his teacher, he doesn't know who to turn to for help, but his grandpa's home, and they get on the computer, and with the help of the internet, they travel back in time and discover how the fur trade began, how a new people emerged, the Métis role in the fur trade, all about Louis Riel and the Red River Resistance and the reason that we now celebrate Louis Riel Day. It's told in rhyming verse with a vivid and lively style of illustration. Next up, I have 4 books that are connected. This series was originally created as part of a water curriculum project here in British Columbia and features Indigenous traditional science perspectives and knowledge. Although similar in appearance, each book is aimed at a different age level, and I'll highlight that as we go. The 4 of them encompassing ages 5 to 13 between them. Also included are Indigenous terms used through central BC in the Sayax language. Author Heron Hall is an emerging writer from the Sayax Nation and uses words in the language spoken by these people as part of her storytelling. And each book has a different illustrator, although all are Indigenous. First up is Lessons from Beaver's Work for ages 10 to 13. And the lesson here comes from traditional storytelling that uses modern language and a modern setting. A beaver and an Indigenous rancher each have different plans for the river water. And the beaver encourages the rancher to look at the water through the eyes of the animals around them who need water access just as much as people do. The Water Sings to Sully is aimed at ages 5 to 7 and is a story of Sully who encounters a water spirit, and that spirit encourages her to listen to the world around her. At first, what she hears are the sounds of the city nearby, but gradually those sounds fall away and she hears the sound of the birds, the trees, and the water. with the water speaking to her the loudest. And she goes on to carry this message of the importance of water back to her community. Water Changeling is aimed at ages 7 to 10 and is a simple story about the journey and transformation of water from the tops of the mountain down through the rivers and the streams, the connection between water, the sun, and the moon, and the ability of water to change into other forms like rain, snow, and hail. And the fourth book in this set is We Go with Muskrat, and is a kind of a call and response story that follows Muskrat underwater, and Muskrat introduces us to other creatures living in the watershed. The book combines really beautiful imagery and kind of funny descriptions as Muskrat introduces us to a diverse set of underwater creatures. Then I have just a couple of YA titles. First up, The Disability Experience. And this book examines the way people with disabilities have historically been ignored or marginalized, and as well as celebrates triumphs and achievements and shares the powerful stories of those who have fought for change. Written for people who are not living with disabilities, this book is a powerful empathy builder and features the voices of people living with a variety of different disabilities, both visible and invisible. For me, the takeaway was that people living with disabilities face all the same challenges as everyone else, but don't have the same access to education, employment, housing, transportation, and healthcare in order to achieve their goals. And this is an Own Voices title. And my last book on this list is A Perfect Likeness, which is a set of 2 novellas connected by theme, both written by Richard Wagamese. And these were originally published in 2010 and 2012. They were published originally as kind of high-low titles for striving adult readers. But there is certainly no content that would keep these out of a children's collection or a YA collection. There is a beautiful foreword to this book by Wab Rice, and I wish I could read you the whole thing, but I will just settle for a small excerpt. Richard Wagamese was one of those iconic and important storytellers. He spoke his truth and shared his journey, overcoming the ravages of colonialism to bring people together and teach others. He didn't want to leave anyone out of his storytelling circle, and this collection of 2 novellas is a sincere reflection of that. The Next Sure Thing and Him Standing are poignant stories about young Indigenous people navigating their way through urban life, excuse me, while staying true to their roots. And with his succinct, powerful telling of these stories, Richard once again found a way to help readers of all backgrounds connect. And that is my whole list, and I will turn you over to the capable hands of Allie Chenoweth at Scholastic.
Thank you so much, Janet, for passing the torch in more ways than one. I'm Allie Chenoweth from Scholastic Canada. I'm so excited to talk about these new titles for spring from some phenomenal authors, some who are up and coming, others who are established, but they are all deserving of more spotlight. So my very first book is my very favorite book in the whole wide world. This is written by Malcolm Mitchell, who is an NFL Super Bowl champion and literacy champion. Malcolm was a struggling reader himself. He was at a middle grade reading level when he started college, but he committed to himself that he would become a stronger reader. He even joined a women's book club when he was a young man, and today is a voracious reader dedicated to promoting literacy. So this book very much draws from his experience. It's about Henley, who is good at plenty of things, but reading is just not his thing. Sometimes the words are too big, the sentences are too long, or maybe he just doesn't connect with the story. But he is faced with the nightmare of homework assignments. He has to present his favorite book in the whole wide world to the class. And so he heads to the library and then the local bookstore, but even with the best efforts of a librarian and a bookseller, he still can't find a book that really captures his heart. But his mom reassures him that sometimes the best stories can be found within ourselves. And so he has a bit of a light bulb moment and he writes his own story, the book that you're reading right now. It's a great story of perseverance, and it goes out of its way to never frame a kid's reluctance to read in feelings of shame, which is really important modeling behavior. My next book is goes round and round. It's a delicious twist on the wheels on the bus that celebrates food, laughter, love in a multi-generational family. Readers will love this joyful, expressive sing-along of slurping noodles, squishing tofu, tapping chopsticks at the round table as they sing along to the familiar tune. Wendy Wanlong-Shang has written some fabulous middle grade novels, and this is her first picture book. And it also includes back matter with a food glossary, information about the Chinese family names used, and guidelines on dining etiquette for a Chinese meal, as well as a very thoughtful note from the author and illustrator about what gathering for family meals means to them. My next picture book is You Are Enough, and it's a great picture book for self-esteem and empathy building, much like Peter Reynolds' Be You. I'm finding that empathy and inclusion are just remaining this constant theme each season, particularly with picture books. This is inspired and created with Sophia Sanchez, who is an 11-year-old girl with Down syndrome. She's an advocate, model, and actress. And the text speaks directly to the reader, and it shows from Sophia's perspective that being different may at times be hard, whether it's because of how you look or what you can or can't do. But being different is something to be celebrated, because it would be very boring if everyone was the same. And what makes you different is what makes you, you, and you are enough just as you are. You'll see that the illustrations are bright and colorful, and the kids in the artwork really reflect a very broad and inclusive range of kids with different identities. And there's also back matter that answers some frequently asked questions from kids about Down syndrome, as well as a page with guidance on how to talk about Down syndrome in a sensitive and respectful way. And then my last picture book is Lala's Words. This is a debut Canadian author illustrator, Gracie Zhang. If you loved Sidewalk Flowers, you will love this one. It's about a rambunctious little girl who's buzzing with energy, and she bounces down her city block every day to go meet her friends, who are these tiny plants and weeds poking through the cracks of concrete. And she brings them water and whispers to them loving words of encouragement, reminding them how special they are, the kinds of words she deserves to hear herself. But her mother keeps her home one day, and she continues to whisper her words at the window, and overnight, like magic, the plants grow up and over her city block, in through her window, inspiring awe from all of her neighbors and her mother at this miracle of a little girl. I love all of the bright yellowy gold surrounding Lala. She's the sunshine, and all the plants grow towards her. Moving into middle grade, The Magical Reality of Nadia is the first book in a series written by Bassem Youssef, who you might recognize if you're a longtime fan of The Daily Show. He was a recurring correspondent, and he had his own political satire show in Egypt and was called the Jon Stewart of the Arab world before he came to the United States. So this does not fall in your typical category of celebrity who woke up one day and decided to write a children's book. He has a young daughter also named Nadia, who is an Egyptian girl now growing up with dual citizenship and dual identities. And he wrote this book so that she would have something she could recognize herself in, as well as offering a story for kids that, like The Daily Show, helps them understand complex issues with humor. So it's about a girl named Nadia who is nerdy and bubbly and sweet, sometimes a bit of a know-it-all, but she has some middle school problems that she doesn't have the answers to, like how to deal with classmates whose jokes and comments can subtly and not so subtly be racist to her and the other immigrant kids at her school. But she discovers a magical hippopotamus pendant that contains an ancient Egyptian teacher named Titi trapped inside from a curse. And when she sets him free, he takes her on magical adventures back to ancient times, teaching her lessons from the past that can help inform her modern day problems. So he's a little bit like the genie from Aladdin, and the sections of their adventures are illustrated in black and white comic style pages from Douglas Holgate. So the author is actually in works for adapting the series into an animated TV series where he will, of course, lend his voice to the character of Titi. So it's a great series to start picking up that just came out this month. Next, I have Sugar and Spite. Gail Villanueva is a Filipina author. Her debut novel, My Fate According to the Butterfly, got lots of starred reviews. It was on several year-end best of lists. And her second middle grade novel is slightly lighter fare, but still has lots of heart. It's about a girl named Jolina who moves to a smaller provincial town from the big city of Jakarta, Philippines, so her family can be closer to her aging grandfather. And her grandfather is very well respected in the community for his arbulario healing magic, which is a very real culture in the Philippines. It's rooted in traditional naturopathic healing practices from indigenous cultures, combined with the Catholicism over the centuries of Philippines colonial history. So Jolina is training under her grandfather and decides to brew a love potion for her wealthy, snobby classmate Claudine, who has been picking on her since she moved to town. And she kind of figures she's doing everyone a favor, making this girl into a nicer person, but she's been warned that magic should never be cast with selfish intentions. But then once the love potion starts working, Jolina starts to get to know Claudine for real, and she's stuck with a moral quandary of whether or not to come clean about the nature of their friendship, and faces unanticipated disastrous consequences from her selfishly cast magic. This contains a rich cultural environment, middle grade social dynamics, and an important lesson about consent, making it a sensitive and entertaining read. Next, I have Do You Know Me? And it's a sequel to Can You See Me from Libby Scott and Rebecca Westcott. It's another heartwarming and eye-opening story about friendship in middle school, and it's inspired by Libby's own experiences of autism. So it's about a girl named Tally, and she's very excited for a week-long class trip, but there are lots of things to be nervous about. Her classmates know that she's autistic now, and she's becoming more comfortable being herself, but she's thrown for a loop when she finds out that she's not rooming with her best friend, and instead she is rooming with her former friends and two girls from another school who reject her immediately. So it's told through a mix of prose and diary entries and is authentic and relatable. It's about finding your people and learning what it takes to be a true friend. And I think it's important to have authentic representation of autism and neurodivergence so that kids who need to see their own experiences can, as well as for neurotypical kids who really need help bridging that empathy gap. So next I have Flood City from Daniel Jose Oler, who's a fabulous writer. He has left the Civil War era with dinosaurs behind from Dactyl Hill Squad, and he's gone completely in the opposite direction in time with Flood City. It's set in Earth in the distant future. The last inhabitable place above water is Flood City, with mostly Black and brown residents who live in the upper floors of high-rises, and they travel around the city using jet boots. Flood City is also the last battleground between the chemical barons, the mostly white group of former elites who live high up in the atmosphere in spaceships, just desperate to reclaim the surface. And then there's the Star Guard, the alien military group that has controlled the city for decades, lording their supposed protection over the human residents of Flood City. So it's about Max, who is a spunky kid born and raised in Flood City, and his world collides with Otto, a young chemical baron who has become disillusioned with his people. And the two boys form an unlikely friendship and become fearless allies in a bitter battle for the fate of Earth, as they uncover that the chemical barons and Star Guard are perhaps not the most embittered enemies they pretend to be, and they must do everything they can to liberate the people of Flood City. This is a fantastic space opera with so many parallels to our own world, a great engaging sci-fi adventure. And then I have some young adult novels, starting with the powerful and long-anticipated companion to Sharon Flake's The Skin I'm In. In The Life I'm In, it presents an unflinching story of Shar, a young woman who gets trapped in the underground world of human trafficking. I've been hearing these awful statistics about how human trafficking has been on the rise in Canada, especially over the pandemic, that the 401 highway corridor is the route that so many women and girls are trafficked along, and this is a really pervasive problem that does not get nearly the kind of media attention it should. The Life I'm In offers a glimpse into how vulnerable women are targeted and taken, usually by someone they know, and this book might save lives once you know what to look out for. So Charlize Jones has been kicked out of several schools and is being raised by her older sister. And when her sister has had enough of her, she sends her packing on a bus to go live with her grandparents. But she's a bit headstrong and has a mind of her own, and she gets off in a city that she doesn't know and tries to make it on her own. But soon she falls under the spell of a seemingly kind man who promises her a job and good money, only to trap her into his sex trafficking ring. Her escape and dealing with the aftermath of her PTSD is so powerful and heartbreaking, and you'll revisit favorite characters from The Skin I'm In as well. And ultimately, the story does have a hopeful end. I think one of the amazing things that Sharon has done in this book is she's made a very thoughtful choice to never describe the graphic sexual assault that Shar experiences. You know what's happening, but Sharon chooses not to re-traumatize anyone who may have had similar experiences. So it's gotten tons of starred reviews, and they are very well deserved. My next book is Muted. This is a novel in verse, perfect for fans of Tiffany D. Jackson's Grown and Elizabeth Acevedo's The Poet X. Tammy Charles has written a number of books. Most recently, the picture book from October, All Because You Matter, was tons of starred reviews. And Charles returns to young adult, though, in Muted, about a teenage girl named Denver Lee LaFleur, and she has big dreams of stardom, singing R&B songs that she writes and performs with her two best friends. Denver's talent is undeniable, and they are discovered by Sean Mercury Ellis, or Merc to his fans, when the girls give an impromptu performance in the stadium parking lot at one of his concerts. Denver and her best friend Deli jump at the chance to sign a recording contract that will change their lives, but little do they know what Merc really has in store for them, and that their path to stardom could be what ends up ultimately destroying them. It's a novel in verse that's deeply informed by the troubling revelations from surviving R. Kelly, as well as the author's own brush with fame in a one-hit wonder R&B group in the 90s. So the verse is so accessible, and it feels like you're reading the pages of Denver's diary, and the book's ending is haunting in a way that will leave your jaw on the floor. And finally, my last title is Sabina Khan's sophomore novel, Zara Hossein is Here. It is a follow-up to her wonderful The Love and Lies of Roxana Ali, which had tons of star reviews and was a White Pine Award nominee. And Zara Hossein is Here is about a girl fighting to make space for herself in a world that is not always welcoming. It's about Zara, whose family moved from Pakistan to the United States when she was very young, and Corpus Christi, Texas is the only home she's ever known. She is the only Muslim girl at her conservative Catholic high school, and she is bisexual as well, so her approach has always been to lay low and not stir up any trouble that might jeopardize her family's visa status while they await their green cards that have been in the process for nearly a decade. And while she's preoccupied thinking about college applications and the girl in her social justice youth group that she has a crush on, but she's also dealing with a racist bully at school named Tyler. And one day Tyler takes his harassment, and it gets out of hand, and he graffitis her locker with a racist threat. And once he faces the consequences of his actions by getting suspended and kicked off a football team, him and his cronies double down, and they vandalize the Hosseins' home, which has a domino effect leading to a violent incident where Tyler's father shoots Zara's father and claims it was in self-defense, putting Zara and her family's entire future at risk. This is a must-read novel for Gen Z, and Zara reminds me so much of Star Carter from The Hate U Give. Her indomitable spirit and refusal to back down in the face of losing everyone and everything that she's ever loved will inspire readers to resist and stand up for creating a better, more just world. So that's it for me. I'm going to hand you over to Rosalyn Steele. Thank you so much, everyone.
Hi, thanks so much, Allie. Hi, I'm Rosalyn Steele from HarperCollins. Thanks so much for tuning in today to our webinar. Before I start on the first slide, before I start talking about some of the actual books, I wanted to quickly highlight two initiatives that HarperCollins is undertaking on the diversity front to make it easier for booksellers, librarians, and educators to select diverse books. Our U.S. publishing program has created an initiative called Shake Up Your Shelves, with resources and ideas to help teachers and librarians update their collections, both by retiring books that are offensive or outdated, and by adding titles that reflect the experiences of more underrepresented groups. And HarperCollins Canada recently launched a microsite linked to our main webpage called Read Better, where each season we'll pull out and highlight works by Indigenous, LGBTQ, and authors of color from our publishing program. So both great resources to check out each season. So on to some of my favorite new picture books from underrepresented authors. First up is In My Mosque, a gorgeous picture book that will help foster a better understanding of the Muslim religion. The book takes readers through the rituals and beauty found at mosques around the world, told through a child's perspective. From prayers to feasting to collecting food donations, the text reminds readers that we are more alike than different. In my mosque, we pray for peace, love, and joy, just like my friends who worship in churches, temples, and synagogues. New Brunswick-based illustrator Hatem Ali's colorful, fresh, and vibrant art is very accessible for young children, bringing the wonder and spirit of mosques to life. And the book also includes extensive back matter with information on some of the most famous mosques in the world, including Canada's oldest mosque, which is found in Edmonton. Like a Dandelion is a new book that features the important topic of immigration. So I was really glad to see this book on our list, introducing young readers to this important topic. It uses the dandelion as a metaphor. The dandelion's growth from seed to shoot to blossom is a sunny metaphor for the resilience of immigrants and refugees. The text is gentle and lyrical, using very simple words to tell the story of a young girl and her mother as they make their way to a new country. Like feathery seeds, we take flight, finding new home even in the tiniest space. We put down roots in unfamiliar soil and nourish ourselves through the winter slumber. Soon they blossom in their new home, strong and beautiful among many others just like them. So this is an own voices book. The text is childhood experience of moving to the US as a Cambodian refugee and has included back matter, as a photo of her and her siblings at a refugee camp, as well as information about the history and uses of dandelions. I had mentioned in our last diversity webinar for Whitehots that a series of I Can Reads called Ties Travels. We don't typically have a lot of diverse voices in our first reader program, so I was really excited about this new series launch. And I'm very happy to say that the first two books were recently honored at the ALA Midwinter Conference, where the series was named a Theodore Geisel Honored Book or series. We have a third book in the series called Beach Day, which is coming out this May. My next slide is Eyes That Kiss in the Corners by Joanna Ho. The media often portrays Asian eyes in a negative light. Joanna transforms this negative portrayal into something beautiful and empowering. The main character learns to love her eyes, which are, while different than those of the other kids at school, are just like her mother's, her grandmother's, and sisters. The writing is beautiful, and the Zhang Ho's art creates a visual world filled of wonder, magic, and love. And we just found out that there will be a companion book featuring a little boy who learns to love his eyes too, coming next winter. Next up, I'm on to some middle grade titles. The first two books have recently published, but definitely don't miss these if you hadn't picked them up already. Amari and the Knight Brothers is first of a trilogy of magic, full of magical world building, witty humor, and genuinely surprising twists and turns. A 13-year-old girl named Amari discovers that she's a powerful magician, and there is a hidden supernatural world that she wasn't aware of until now. Amari is invited to a magical training camp hosted by the Bureau of Supernatural Affairs, the same program her older brother Quentin attended before disappearing. There she discovers that she's a magician, but with powers that are illegal, which makes her some enemies. But she's determined to find her brother, which helps her find the strength to persevere despite many obstacles. This is full of Black girl magic. There's still not nearly enough fantasy books for this age group with Black girl protagonists, especially from Black writers. It's a fantasy adventure perfect for fans of Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, and Nevermore, but also skillfully tackles major social justice issues like racism, classism, and prejudice. And it's been optioned by Universal Pictures for a film. While I Was Away by Waka T. Brown is a memoir with author Waka recollecting her experiences visiting Japan as a kid in the 80s. Her parents had sent her for several months to visit her grandmother, believing that Waka was forgetting the Japanese that they had taught her. Traveling from Kansas to Japan all by herself is just the beginning of a very trying summer for the 12-year-old. Once in Tokyo, she experiences major culture shock. She must learn how to read and write in a language she barely understands. She gets bullied by her peers who call her dumb and tries to navigate a complicated relationship with her cold and strict grandmother. She's an inspiring character to root for. It's a memoir that reads like a novel, very accessible and humorous. Finding Junie Kim is on our summer list. This is Ellen O's first contemporary middle grade novel. It's the story of a young Korean American girl named Junie Kim, who is the target of racism at school. But in coming to know the story of her grandparents in the Korean War for a school project, Junie learns that she is so much more than the sum of stereotypes and hateful racial slurs, and comes to love and accept her heritage. Ellen skillfully weaves together the grandmother and grandfather's experience in the Korean Wars with Junie Kim's present-day struggles. It's a very poignant family story, and one that is very close to the author's hearts. The stories that Grandma and Grandpa share with Junie about their childhood experiences during the Korean War actually did happen to Ellen's parents. Ellen and her daughter have both experienced racism firsthand, so she's definitely writing from a point of experience. This book will hopefully inspire readers to stand up against racism and be proud of their own heritages. Ahmad Aziz's Epic Year. There's not nearly enough books for this age range featuring contemporary coming-of-age Muslim characters, this is written by an Own Voices author. Ahmad offers a nuanced perspective of what life is like for a Muslim tween in a place where he stands out as one of the only brown-skinned kids. Ahmed is not happy to have been forced to move from Hawaii to his father's hometown in Minnesota after his father gets sick, struggling to deal with both the climate and new school. As a rather reluctant learner, he surprises himself by not only actually reading the 3 books assigned to him in English class, Hole's Bridge to Terabithia and From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler, but also how they impact him. They teach him how to deal with the struggles in his life as he's dealing with his father's illness and researching an uncle who died before Ahmed was born. He's a bit of a mysterious figure. He has an unforgettable voice. He's sarcastic and has a biting sense of humor, and you'll really fall for this boy as you see him coming into his own identity. And Unsettled by Reem Farouque. It's the middle grade debut from the author of the ALA notable picture book, Layla's Lunchbox. It's told in verse, and it's a stirring middle grade immigration story about a girl named Noura who moves from Pakistan to Georgia at age 13, struggling to fit in as she tries to make friends and joins the swim team. Her family undergoes prejudice and violence once they immigrate to the US, they have to work through the trauma of racism, and Reem depicts this healing process in a very realistic way. Given the state of the world today, this story is very relevant and timely. And this is actually an Own Voices title as well. Reem Farouque is of Pakistani descent and immigrated to the US from the United Arab Emirates when she was just a young girl. My next slide has 2 LGBT books for middle grade readers. The Fabulous Zed Watson is a wonderful new book from parent and child writing team Kevin and Basil Sylvester. Kevin is the well-known author of the Neil Flambe series, and Basil is his child who identifies as non-binary. In this book, the character, who's also non-binary, Zed, takes a road trip with their neighbor Gabe and his sister on a quest for a hidden manuscript. With a academic in hot pursuit. There's a lot of action, there's a lot of adventures, mishaps, and this academic always seems to be mysteriously one step ahead. The story and mystery are really fun, and readers will fall in love with Zed and the other characters in this book, who are all very multidimensional and unique. This next one is Both Can Be True. Again, there's not many middle grade novels currently in the market that explore gender fluidity, whether by itself or accompanied by a romance, and this book does both. Debut author Jules explores identity, gender fluidity, and the power of friendship and acceptance in this dual narrative story about 2 kids who join forces to save a dog, but wind up saving each other. Ash is gender fluid, some days undoubtedly a girl, but other times 100% boy. They know exactly what it's like to feel like an outcast, as they have no control of how they cycle through genders. Daniel has always struggled with his emotions and has been told he's overly sensitive more times than he can count. Both Ash and Daniel just wish someone would accept them as they are, and they actually find that when the two meet through Chewbacca, an incontinent and slightly senile Pomeranian dog who both kids risk everything to save from euthanization. When their friendship turns to a mutual crush, they both find a place to be themselves without judgment, explanation, and apology. And as I mentioned, this is a non-binary Own Voices title. It explores gender fluidity with ease and hopefully will help readers understand the term if they're not familiar with it, and also serve as a safe place for readers across the gender and sexuality spectrums. On my next slide, we are starting in winter. We launched a new imprint called Heart Drum, which is dedicated to Native and First Nations voices. This was created in partnership with We Need Diverse Books and co-founded by distinguished author, teacher, and Native literature advocate Cynthia Lytick Smith, a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation. So this imprint features both books by up-and-coming and well-established Native and First Nations authors and illustrators, and they plan to publish books in a range of formats and genres from picture books right up to teen fiction. So we launched in winter with 2 books, The Sea in Winter, which features a young girl named Maisie who is devastated when a knee injury prevents her from doing her passion ballet and falls into a depression, and Ancestor Approved, a short story collection featuring intersecting stories of Native children whose families have gathered in Michigan from across Canada and the US for an intertribal powwow. And that features 2 Canadian contributors, David A. Robertson, who's Cree and based in Winnipeg, and Victoria-based author Monique Grace Smith, who's a member of the Wasanuk people. So coming up in this imprint, we have 3 new titles for the summer. We have Jojo Macoons, which is the first of a new chapter book series about a spunky Ojibwe girl living on a reservation who has her own view of the world, which often leads to misunderstandings with the adults in her life. Quite funny and joyful, and features illustrations throughout from a New Brunswick-based illustrator who has previously published 2 graphic novels. Healer of the Water Monster is a debut Own Voices middle grade story featuring a young Navajo hero named Nathan, a quest monster named Pond, and a journey to another realm. It's really the perfect adventure story for fans of Rick Riordan and his Rick Riordan Presents line, with themes of bravery, responsibility, and respect, and also dealing with some other issues. Nathan's uncle Jet is grappling with undiagnosed post-traumatic stress. He's a war veteran and also with depression and alcoholism. Sisters of the Neversea is by Cynthia L. Smith, and this is a fresh adaptation on the classic Peter Pan story. Of course, the world of Neverland will be familiar to anyone who has read the book or watched the Disney animated film. Here, the author has made the tale feel fresh, modern, and all of her own by telling it from the point of view of Wendy and her native stepsister Lily, who is also, like the author, is also from the Muskogee Creek tribal community. This book addresses Native representation. The original Peter Pan book portrayed Injuns as primitive and stereotypical, and the author has turned this treatment around to show how wrong it is. It features a wonderful blended family. The Roberts Darling family is both touching and realistic, particularly the loving relationship between Lily and Wendy, as well as the depiction of the wider Muskogee Creek community that has welcomed the family into the fold. But of course, it also captures the adventure and magic of Neverland, complete with mermaids, fairies, and pirates, and other wild animals. Moving on to some of my young adult picks. The first slide in this section focuses on some of our more recently published YA books by Black authors. Concrete Rose is the prequel to The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, set in the 90s and telling the story of the dad from The Hate You Give, Maverick, who was dealing drugs to help his mom pay the bills while his dad was in prison until he found out that he was going to be a father himself and takes a chance to go straight. Like Home by Louisa Onome is a debut novel by Nigerian-Canadian author Louise, anime, and it's set in the GTA in a fictional neighborhood called Ginger East, which is inspired by Rexdale, for anyone who knows the area. It's about how a girl's life is turned upside down after one local act of vandalism throws both her relationships and the neighborhood into turmoil. It touches upon gentrification, a hate crime, as well as typical teen concerns like changing bodies and changing relationships. Like Home is very accessible and compelling, and many reviewers have actually compared it to The Hate U Give, but accessible to a bit of a younger readership. Witches Steeped in Gold is our first Jamaican-inspired fantasy about two witches who team up to bring down a common enemy, one of their mothers, who has been enslaving the other's people. Told from alternating points of view, this fantasy has lots of twists and turns, a unique and interesting form of magic, and a great cliffhanger ending that will leave readers desperate for the conclusion of this duology. Happily Ever Afters is a smart, endlessly charming romantic comedy for the teen market about Tessa, a biracial teen and budding writer who pens romance stories that she thinks that nobody else will ever read. But after getting accepted into a writing program, she finds that she'll be required to share her work with her fellow students and develops a crippling case of writer's block. Her best friend thinks that the perfect way to kickstart her inspiration is for her to get involved in a real-life romance of her own. Tess has just the boy in mind, but unexpectedly finds herself drawn to Sam, her neighbor and friend. One of the good ones is the second book from the authors of the highly praised Dear Haiti, Love Elaine. In this book, sisters Micah and Maritza Malut continue to explore powerful themes that impact communities of color in a very universal and accessible way. In this book, a teenage social activist named Kenzie, with a large YouTube following, is killed under mysterious circumstances after attending a social justice rally. When Kenzie is held up by the media as a martyr in the fight against police brutality, her sister Happy begins to question the idealized way her sister is being remembered. Perfect Angelic, one of the good ones. Next up is a slide featuring 4 titles by Black authors coming this summer that you shouldn't miss. Blackout is a collaborative novel by 6 powerhouse authors: Danielle Clayton, who was one of the co-founders of We Need Diverse Books, Tiffany D. Jackson, Nick Stone, Angie Thomas, Ashley Woodfolk, and Nicola Yoon. And it follows 12 teens who get stuck in New York City during a blackout, each coming face to face with a question about love. Excuse Me While I Ugly Cry is a perfect debut for Jenny Han readers. It's about a girl who loses her journal full of things that she wants to do. And then someone starts blackmailing her, and she ends up getting help from a very unexpected source, her polar opposite, and a very popular guy. So this has a great enemies to lovers trope, and also examines racial and socioeconomic issues. Where the Rhythm Takes You, I do love a good Jane Austen adaptation, and this debut novel was inspired by my favorite Austen novel, Persuasion, set in the author's native Trinidad and Tobago. It's about a 17-year-old girl named Reina who feels trapped working at her family's seaside resort in Tobago. It's been 2 years since her mother died, and Aiden, her childhood best friend, first love, first kiss, first everything, left the island to pursue his music dreams. All of her friends are planning their futures and heading abroad, and she despairs that she'll never get to live her own dreams. But then Aiden comes roaring back into her life as a VIP guest at the resort, along with his Grammy award-winning soca band. It's funny, sexy, full of longing, a perfect summer read. A Sitting in St. James is by Rita Williams Garcia. This is a sophisticated book starring adult characters and would be great for older teen readers who enjoyed The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. It tells the stories of one white family and the enslaved people who work for them at the Gilbert plantation. It does not shy away from the horrors that occur on the plantation, but every character, white and black, is portrayed with empathy and humanization. On my next slide, I'm happy to see that we also have a great selection of titles from authors writing about characters from India, Bangladesh, and other perspectives. We've got returning favorites, Tahari Mafi and Jasmine Carr, but we also have some debuts. Sisters of the Snake, you might have seen the Quill and Quill and Quire profile of these two twin authors earlier this week. It's a debut fantasy filled with wonderful detail and unique world building that is inspired by their own Indian heritage, as well as their experience growing up as twin sisters. It's about a princess and a street urchin who discover that they look absolutely identical and swap identities. So that's a familiar trope made fresh with high stakes, deadly consequences, dark and eerie snake magic, and much, much more. Counting Down With You is about a Bangladeshi American girl named Karina who just wants to keep her head down and get through school, but then her overprotective and strict parents go on an extended vacation, leaving her on her own, and she unexpectedly gets caught up in a fake dating scheme when she agrees to tutor the school's bad boy Ace, who managed to convince her to go along with his saving face scheme by promising to buy her a dozen new books each week. She's got only 28 days before her parents get home and her life will return to normal. But as she gets to know Ace better, she realizes that going back to normal isn't what she wants. The Marvelous Mirza Girls is, the author has made her a name for herself by writing smart, sarcastic, feminist Pakistani-American protagonists who are facing real-life struggles. In this book, a young girl finds out about herself and her family and finds her own voice after moving to New Delhi and discovering stand-up comedy. My last two slides feature some of our great LGBTQ authors on our list. All of the books on this first slide feature characters and authors from the less represented part of the LGBTQ plus spectrum. This Golden Flame was out this winter. It's written by Canadian librarian Emily Victoria, who's based in Lethbridge, Alberta. And as an asexual woman, Emily channels facets of her own experience through that of her main character, Karis, who is not only asexual, but aromantic. In this fantasy novel, Karis discovers an automaton named Alex and teams up with it to find out what happened to her brother, who disappeared years ago, only to find that their search also uncovers a lot of secrets relating to the automaton's mysterious past. Great world building and very engaging characters. The Witch King is first book in an Own Voices debut fantasy duology from Indigenous trans author H.E. Edgman. The author brings a fresh perspective along with a voice that cuts like a knife in this insightful fantasy novel. There's definitely an underrepresented voice. It's very rare to find a fantasy featuring a trans character. So this fills a void in the market. The main character is a trans boy and witch growing up in a society where fae and witches are treated as second-class citizens. He is engaged to the crown prince, and the witch community is hoping the marriage will change things for the better for them. But the pressure becomes too much, and he ends up running away to the human world with his fiancée in hot pursuit. All Kinds of Other is another, it's a romance between two boys, one who is cis and one who is trans. The author, this is his first teen novel, but he really totally nails the voice and experience of being a teenager, all of the frustrations, blushes, awkwardness, and the oh my godness of it all. Meet Cute Diary is by Emery Lee, a trans masculine author. This also features a transgender protagonist who has created a blog featuring meet cute stories about trans people. But it was actually based on his daydreams. He never meant it to go viral and now has thousands of followers. But then a troll exposes the diary as fiction and his world unravels. The Unpopular Vote is about a trans masculine kid who promises to remain stealth while his dad is running for Congress, but that promise goes out the window when something happens at their school, and he ends up running for school office in order to make the school a safer place for all. My last slide features many returning LGBT authors. The top line all feature male-male romances, and the bottom line all feature female-female relationships. We have returning favorite Julie Murphy, who's writing the third in her Dumpling series, Pumpkin, and Elliot Schreffer, The Darkness Outside Us, who is making a welcome return to teen fiction after writing several middle grade series for us. I did want to give a shout out for Jay's gay agenda, which is actually getting a lot of buzz. It's being named to many of the most anticipated list of 2021 and getting and received a rave endorsement from Becky Albertalli. It's about a gay boy who moves from a small town to the big city with a thriving and supportive LGBT community where he might actually finally get a chance to cross things off his gay to-do list. Readers have been clamoring for more of these contemporary, lighthearted rom-coms featuring LGBT characters, and this is the perfect addition to that genre. It's sex positive and funny, but also layered and poignant. So that's my list. I hope you found lots of new recommendations to shake up your shelves and to add more underrepresented voices to your collections.
Well, I just wanted to thank all of the Dewey Divas and the Dude for your time and your expertise. I certainly couldn't do my job without all of you. So thanks again. That was a really wonderful presentation. And just to remind everybody that this will be available on our website, as well as the recording will be available next week. I hope everybody has a great day, and until our next Dewey Divas presentation, everybody stay safe.
Bye.
Bye.